Hey guys, what's going on? It's Mike from Skill of Strength. We're going to go over some single leg deadlift progressions, regressions, and hopefully I can answer some of the questions a few of you had with the single leg deadlift. Before we dive in, ask yourself this. One, why are you currently introducing the single leg deadlift into the program? What is the goal of this, right? Is the goal to improve balance? Is the goal to improve dynamic motor control? Is the goal to improve strength? So just understand first and foremost, like, why are you putting this in their program, okay? If you can't answer why you're adding the deadlift in, you probably shouldn't be doing it, right? So you should always have an answer for what you're doing. So that's, right away, the most important thing you should focus on. Now, when we do program it, people dive in way too quickly and they dive right to the floor, right? They put a weight on the ground, they grab a kettlebell, and boom, they just challenge it, and it looks like absolute rubbish. And it's like anything. It's like saying, hey, I want to teach you the basics of a front squat and a deadlift before we teach you how to clean, right? So we want to do the basic things that are necessary for the single leg deadlift. We want to make sure that we're hitting on the basics before we go into the single leg deadlift, okay? So just don't add too much too soon. Now, requirements. You have to have a toe touch, right? Why do you have to have a toe touch? Because you want to make sure that you own that posterior weight shift. Two, you want to make sure that you have a decent active straight leg raise and a symmetrical straight leg raise. So in the FMS world, that's a pair of twos or better. From there, cool, we've got the basics. We can program and attack the patterning. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the degree of knee flexion and hip flexion. And simple way to do this is to feel where the weight shift is. So if we're here, in order to have a good deadlift, we need a posterior weight shift. The hips have to go back, right? Now, if we stiff leg this exercise and we come forward, that tends to make our weight shift into our toes a little bit more. So if our weight is in our toes, then clearly we don't have a posterior weight shift and it's not going to go so well. So we want to make sure that people feel where they need to be. If I'm kind of doing a high hip position here where my hamstrings are streaming, my weight shift is in the middle of my foot and slightly forward, and that's not optimal. We want to make sure that we get a little bit of knee flexion and allow the hips to travel backwards and move into that posterior position. So we're going to start off with a very, very simple way to work on the single leg deadlift. And I'm going to have Steve do this with a dowel. And this is the drill we just went over. Now, I like to start in a bilateral stance. And from there, we do the cueing. Steve is going to be using the dowel as some assistance, right? It's kind of like training wheels. Training wheels are there to help you get used to the bike. But eventually, we got to take the training wheels off. So within this progression, we are going to start with some training wheels, and then there's a very, very simple way to take those training wheels off. So we're going to get Steve with his feet together. Why feet together? Because if our feet are wide, we have to weight shift too much to get on one leg. So we're going to keep those feet together so the weight shift is minimal. Now from here, he's just going to go into a basic hip hinge. Feet together, close hip hinge. And you're going to notice that the dowel is out front of him. I'm asking him to be active with his grip, to push down into the ground with the dowel. Now Steve's going to, from here, he's got a nice hip hinge, he's got a neutral spine. Just bring your head up a smidge, Steve. And he's going to extend one leg back. Okay? When he does this, there's two different ways we can program this, right? Bring this leg up a little bit higher, Steve. Come on up. In this position, this is really challenging. Okay? The more we extend that leg up, the harder it's going to be. Now, if your goal is to improve dynamic motor control, let's say you're trying to improve their active straight leg raise, this is a fantastic way. So you can take a little break because I know you're getting a little bit smoked here for a second. Holding this position in an isometric hold for a long period of time is just a jerky thing to do. But we're going to show you quickly how we can progress this. We're going to ask you to go into that position one more time. So guys, here's the first step. We get into a hinge, feet together, hips back, we've got the posterior weight shift, reach one leg. Really extend the leg out, Steve. Yeah, so he's active with here. Now, all I'm going to tell Steve to do, guys, is release pressure on the dowel. Don't grip the dowel as much. Now, we're taking the upper body out of the picture, and we're performing an isometric hold in this position. we're just gonna hang out here, and if he needs to stand up, he can re-grip, and then just stand up and come all the way up to a deadlift. Boom. Okay? So guys, what I like about this positioning is we can grip, which can give us those training wheels in that position, and then if we want to make it tougher, we just ungrip. Very, very simple. That's a very, very easy way to get people to understand it. Now, once they own that position, we're going to take away the dowel, we're going to take away any sort of external help, and then we're going to go to a freestanding iso hold. You're going to love it. He's going to love it.
Yeah.
And honestly, this is stuff that actually Steve needs to work on as well, so this is good for him. Steve's exposed. So guys, do you see how we did this? We cue the hands forward a little bit because the cue that I use is the distance from the fingertips to the tailbone should be nice and long. So we're going to extend one leg back. From here, we extend, we reach, boom, we just hang out for a little bit, okay? Now this is tough enough. We look at good mechanics, neutral spine, we want to make sure we're not getting any type of valgus collapse, etc. Everything looks good here, and we're just going to hang out in this position and then just use them to stand up nice and full. So what we're doing here is we're not diving right into a single leg deadlift. We're working on some positional stability, okay? Now once you can own that freestanding, we're going to do a little bit of perturbation work. And what does that mean? We're going to challenge him by just giving him a little bit of feedback and a little bit of a push in various directions. And all we're trying to do is challenge the position. All right, so we'll do one more. And Steve's going to own it, and then I'm going to basically be a jerk. Now at this point, I'm not trying to knock him over, guys. I'm just trying to challenge the position. That's all we're trying to do. Before we add any type of external load, just add a little bit of a challenge to stability. Awesome, thank you for that. Now, once we got the iso hold, then we can go into what I would call an elevated deadlift. So we're going to set this up here, and actually we'll reduce Steve so people can see the sideways. We'll go a bit on the diagonal here. And this diagonal is just so you guys can see exactly what's going on. Yeah, we'll go there. There are other steps within this progression, but we're going to go right to it. Now, I like to use the dowel here, and the reason why I like to use the dowel is to make sure that their whole body moves as one as they stand up. A lot of the times, I think Nikki had a question on, what do we do if someone's collapsing up their upper back? Well, when we get them in the start position, go ahead, Steve. The first thing we're going to do is, hands are going to be on the bells now, Steve. Extend one leg back. And we're just going to cue him to stand all the way up and just stay in contact. Boom, come all the way up. And then, awesome. So just giving a little bit of feedback. You know, we want the dowel to touch on the tailbone. We want to touch the dowel in the upper back. That's it. And on the way back down, same thing. Just don't lose it. Very, very simple cue. Now, this works really, really well. Thanks, bud. This works really, really well at the elevated position. So we need to start here. We can't just start right on the ground and hope it's going to go okay. We'll do some reps here. We'll nail our technique. We'll take a block out and then keep going and eventually work our way to the floor. So we're bringing the floor up to Steve in this position, and that's just a really, really simple way to do it. Now, there's some talk as to what we should be doing with the back leg. Should we be extending the back leg, and should we have a slight bend? And it's really up to you and your goal. Now, in the active straight leg grades, we're looking at several things, but what we're trying to do is how well we can control the core, control the pelvis, have one hip and extension and one hip and flexion. So that's a gigantic part of the active straight leg grades. So we want to replicate that. Okay, so as we get into that position, I like to cue when I'm trying to make a positive change in their motor control within the active straight leg raise. I like to focus on hip hinging and really focus on reaching back. We still need the weight shift, but I like to be active. Push the heel as far back as possible and then stand up. So that's what I like to use. Now, if I'm going heavy, if I'm just trying to develop a ton of single leg strength, a little bit of bend's fine, okay? You know, get down, set up, you can have a little bit of a bend, boom, and you can load up it just really depends on what you're trying to do. I found that extending that hip back and really trying to reach is great for flexibility, right? It's great for just opening things up. But if my goal is strength, and I'm really trying to develop raw strength, yeah, I'm gonna have some bend in the knee. So, very, very simple ways to cue that. Another thing we tend to see is the ice skater, right? And the ice skater is when we see this. We tend to cue. You can actually do some R&T work. FMS Level 2, we show you some really cool different ways that you can use the bands to help fix that. I highly recommend you check out the Level 2 course. But a really simple way to teach people positioning is show them the wrong position, show them the right. It's kind of like the old, the Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Too hot, too cold, just right. So we can have them exaggerate it and then say, okay, let's try to shift back. So it's just showing them the different options. It's kind of like if you don't want someone to shrug, just say shrug. Okay, no, don't shrug. Do the opposite of shrug or anti-shrug. So a lot of times it's just showing them the right and the wrong positions and getting them to feel that. There's a couple other questions. I've got my computer over here. Covered basic. As far as James Spencer was asking, visual cueing to help with balance and equilibrium. Honestly, I feel like if someone's having a tough time with this position, you probably regress them too quickly. Get them back to a wall, get them back to that dowel, and go from there. Maureen had a question of, rotation, etc. Honestly, so I put a video together a while back, and I'll share it again, but there is a progression here, and I like to start with a regular deadlift, and then we go to a kickstand deadlift. And the kickstand deadlift is it's a split stance drill, but it forces you to have a weight shift into the front foot. So 60-70% of the load is in the front foot. That's a fantastic way to load that front hip, but make sure that we're not overwhelming someone, right? Once you can do that for a while, get into those isometric holds, get into that drill we just did with the dowel, and work on some basic slow strength, right? You don't rush to bring a load, right? Don't feel like you need to do it. There's so many different ways that you can do it, but don't skip the isometric component, right? If someone wants to learn a position or needs to learn a position, put them in it and let them feel it out. Don't rush to dynamic strategies when they really could benefit from some isometric work. And then the last thing we'll cover is what's the difference between a single leg deadlift versus a single leg RDL. Very simple. If we're doing in my opinion, if we're doing a single leg deadlift, we're just going single leg RDL, we're going top down. So we're starting here and we're going down, we're not hitting the ground, okay? If we're doing a single leg deadlift, we're having a weight on the ground or on a box. It's a load that's just sitting there, and then we're gonna grip up and then we're gonna stand up. I prefer the single leg deadlift variation because we incorporate grip, which will stabilize the shoulder, and kind of gets everything else fired up. So that's how I tend to utilize it. But don't skip steps, guys. It's really, really simple. And don't rush to the single leg deadlift. It's a fantastic exercise, but it's pretty advanced. And only isometric positions first. Add some slight perturbation, and then work on the patterning at a high point, and then gradually bring the floor down. It's simple. So hopefully that answered some of the questions that you guys had. We appreciate it. If you dug this, share away, and have a good day, guys. We'll see you.